It's just my absolute delight to be here tonight with you to share some ideas for thinking. I hope it will stimulate your thought. I'm not looking for conversions. I'm not looking for people that are going to agree with everything I say. But I hope that as you consider some of the ideas that I have to present, that maybe it will help you at least a step or two along your own path for trying to understand the early chapters of Genesis. So it's great to be here in the midst of the two trees in the middle of the garden, and I'll be talking to you. That was that twisted sense of humor that Dr. Manor mentioned. Anyway, I'm going to be wandering around here. I kind of like to do that while I talk, and so we'll be doing that. I also will be occasionally reading from my slides there, so I hope you won't be offended for me kind of half turning my back to you, but my carrying around the laptop wouldn't do me any good. So we'll make that work. Tonight we want to talk about Genesis 1 and try to come to some understanding of it. Of course, this has been an objective, a quest that people have had for centuries to try to understand this material. It's particularly a poignant point of discussion these days as we continue to try to understand the relationship between the Bible and science and to resolve some of those challenges that we constantly face as we try to sort through this. I have no science to offer tonight. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not really in a position to come to scientific conclusions. I have no science to push. My concern is that we do the best that we can possibly do to read the Bible well. Lots of times what we sense as difficulty in the discussion between Bible and science very much concerns what exactly does the Bible require of us. For those of us who take the Bible seriously, and I assume that's probably most in this room, if we take the Bible seriously, we want that to guide our thinking. But exactly how do we think about the biblical material so that we can be persuaded that we are taking the text seriously? So I want to talk to you tonight about reading Genesis 1. Now, it's not just reading Genesis 1, but as you can see, reading Genesis 1 with ancient eyes. That means you need trifocals. No, okay. Work with me. Okay, so it means, of course, that we want to try to read the text as it was written, as it was conveyed from an ancient author to an ancient audience. And we're going to talk about that whole premise to begin with tonight before we actually launch into the passage itself and my thoughts on the passage. So we have to start by talking about the issue of authority. For those of you who have heard me earlier today, you know that this is kind of the battle cry. This is what frames everything that I do when I'm talking about Scripture. We want to try to be certain that we can get the authoritative message of the text. This is Scripture. This is God's Word. We can't take it lightly. It has authority, and we want to make sure that we can get to that authority. Now, the premise I'm starting with then is that God's purpose is carried out through human purpose. That is, human authors wrote with ideas in mind. They're trying to communicate something. If we believe that they have been moved by the Holy Spirit to do so, then we believe that their purpose coincides with God's purpose. So if we want to understand God's purpose, the authoritative word that He has for people, that we therefore have to get to it through our understanding of the human purpose. If we can't get to it through the human author, we have no access to it. If God had something else in mind besides what He told the human authors, we have no way of getting that. Okay, so we have to work through the human authors to try to understand what their purpose was. That authority then that Scripture has is vested in the human authors. That's the way God decided to do it. We might have objections. We might wish that He would speak directly to us. Okay, but He didn't. That's not the way he did it. So we're working through these human authors, and they become our link to the authority of the text. And everything that I do in the text has to try to preserve that link, because if I leave the author behind, I've left authority behind, and I'm on my own. That's not what we want to happen. So authority is vested in the human author. The text then is written for us, but not to us. That human author wrote in his own language, wrote to his audience, wrote in that culture, with that culture's understanding. And therefore, even though God has revealed himself to the world for all of us, this text is not written to us. And therefore, we have to take steps to join that audience so that we can make sure we get that part that's for us by listening alongside of those to whom it was written. And that's why we talk about reading Genesis 1 through ancient eyes. So the message transcends culture, because that message is God's revelation of himself. That's for everybody. That transcends culture. But at the same time, that the form is culture bound. That's why you need translations. And you not only need translations of the language, you need translations of the culture, because both are foreign to us. So we have to take our place in the audience, in that audience that the author is speaking to. We take our place in that audience, again, by understanding the language, but also by understanding the culture. So we have to think about this process of communication and what we think about that. First of all, we assume the integrity of communication between the author and his first audience. The author is not up there in a trance, mumbling away, mumbo-jumbo that nobody understood. Okay? He is speaking coherently, purposefully, communicating to his audience. And we have to assume that there was integrity in that communication, and that the audience would have understood what was going on. That's why we find hope in trying to join that audience and listen in on the conversation. When we talk about communication situations, and again, some of you heard me talk about this earlier today, if you were in whatever session I talked about this, we can talk about high context and low context. Okay, high context, as it says, is where the speaker and the audience have a lot in common. They share a familiar ground for communication. So if I'm talking to a graduate school classroom, I can assume certain things that they know, certain terms that they will understand. I don't have to explain those all over again, because it's a high context situation that allows me to communicate at a higher level. On the other hand, if I'm talking to my 6th grade Sunday school class, teaching them an introduction to doctrine, I have to use terminology that they will understand. They're in a much lower context. Okay, so high context is high levels of familiarity, common ground. Low context is the opposite. Okay, so low context, the speaker and the audience have little common ground, so much has to be explained. Okay, now it's important, because what's happening is when the author, in a biblical context, when an author is speaking to his audience, he's in a high context situation. They share language, they share experiences, they share history, they share cultural ideas, they share a way of thinking about the world around them. It's a high context situation. When we try to step into that communication circle, we are a low context audience coming into a high context communication. And therein lies the problem. Okay, because we've got a lot of ground to make up before we can really take our place in that audience and understand what's going on. Again, I really don't bring my 6th graders into my grad school classes and expect them to follow what's happening. Okay, if you need something else to hang a hook on for high context, low context, think about texting with your parents. Okay, enough said. So, there are high context situations and low context situations. All right, so we have to understand that in communication, because that kind of situates us. with regard to the audience that is the original audience for the material. So we have to see the world the way the text sees the world. That's the first step. After all, they think about the world very differently than we do. Almost everything we think about our world is not something they thought about their world. And you could kind of click off the issues and you'd see the differences. But see, their whole communication, especially about something like origins, is going to be premised on the way they thought about the world. You know, it's not some abstract, nebulous, universal truth about the world that God kind of ingrained in the text. He spoke His word through that ancient author to that ancient audience. And it's no sense of kind of, I'm going to use scientific truth that all people either do understand or eventually will understand. And if people don't understand it yet, well, give it a couple thousand years, they will. God didn't do that. Integrity of communication. The author understands what he's saying, and his audience understands what he's saying. That means he is not using our science. He is using their world and their ideas. So we have to try to see the world the way the text sees the world if we have any hope of understanding it. I'll turn every once in a while and say hello to you folks. Hello. Okay. So we have to think about cosmic geography. Cosmic geography is the shape of the world. What do you think of when you think of the world? Well, we think about that one on the left. All right, blue Earth, there it is. You've never seen that, of course, because you've never been out there. You've trusted the photographs. No, never mind. Okay, so that's kind of our cosmic geography over there on the left. And there's almost nothing about that they knew or thought in the ancient world. Something like their cosmic geography is something like on the right. Okay, a very different understanding of the world. Well, yeah, let's do that. Egyptians. Little diagram from a tomb painting here on the right in more modern style there on the left, my son's artistry. Hope you like it. You know, when they thought about the cosmos, look at what they thought about. Gods. We think about a material cosmic geography. Not them. They thought about gods. And so there's the blue lady is the sky, arched over the earth. And the stars are emblazoned on her underside. And then you've got the earth god down at the bottom. Okay, and the air god, the guy in white there, is holding them apart. They're husband and wife, so they kind of would like to be together, but he's really a spoiler. And he keeps holding them apart, heaven and earth, kept separately. We've got the sun god in his bark sailing across the skies. See the waters being held back by the lady in blue? They're up there. He's sailing along on them. There's the moon god down back in the back. The storm god here, Seth, battling the chaos creature Apophis. Osiris in the west over there on the right. Their world was full of gods. Now, they've drawn this kind of picture because that is what is most important to them about understanding their world. When they talk about how do I think about the world around me? That's how they think about the world around them. You notice, of course, that this is not a material picture. They didn't think that they could pick up a rock and hit that guy in the shins. Ouch! A little cosmic ouch coming. No, they're not thinking that at all. Because the material aspects of the cosmos didn't matter to them. Didn't matter? Matter? Get it? Okay. Stick with me, I'm moving fast. Okay, so the whole idea here of what's important in how you think about the world around you. For the Israelites, of course, they did not have it peopled with gods. For them, gods were not inside, but rather God was outside. Gods were not identified with all of the parts of the cosmos, like in the Egyptian or Mesopotamian ways of thinking, but God is outside and above it all. Even with that significant theological difference, their cosmic geography is still the same. There's still the waters being held up by a solid sky, being separated by the air pocket, from the earth. So heavens, the waters above, waters below have been separated. And so lots of the same concepts, but again, not peopled. So we have a variety of cosmic geographies, but none of them are like ours. They are much more like one another than they are like us. And if we think that we can take our cosmic geography and import it into Genesis 1, we're going to have a problem. There's anachronism there, imposing modern ideas on ancient texts. That is not the way to try to make peace between Bible and science. We have to read the text as an ancient text. Now, we also must see the text the way the ancient Israelite saw the text. We have to view the world through their eyes. We have to think of the text through their eyes. And so we have to try to read it the way they would. Again, this is a matter of us, low context, joining a high context audience so that we can understand the communication that's taking place there. We're not imposing meaning from our location. We are trying to understand it from their location. And that means we have to start thinking about what these words in the text would have meant to them. Now, we want to take the text at face value then. By face value, I mean that our goal is to understand the text the way the author wanted to be understood without trying to read anything into it, without trying to squeeze anything out of it. This is just a way of saying we're not trying to make the text be something that we want it to be. We're not trying to get it to answer our questions or extract answers for our questions. We are trying to understand the questions the text was asking and the answers the text was offering. And we shouldn't expect them to correspond to our questions and the kinds of answers we might want. We would never expect the text to address common descent or mutations or evolutionary processes or anything of that sort. Those are not their questions. That's not their world. And if we try to extract answers from about those from a text that wasn't meant to address them, we run a great risk of distorting the text. So, part of understanding the face value of the text is, first of all, to understand what kind of genre they're using. Now, this is a tricky one because our first inclination is to slap a genre label on it and say, oh, it's this or it's that. Some would say it's history. Some would say it's mythology. Slapping a label on it. Problem, those are our genre categories that have our definitions of them. No can do. We have to understand how they're understanding the nature of the literature. And the minute we slap a modern label on it, we are suddenly imposing a modern understanding on it. You say, well, what else can we do? I mean, I don't have any Hebrew genre labels to put on it. True. Okay? We don't need to label it. We need to try to understand it for the form of literature it is. After all, that's what genre talks about, form and function. So we try to understand the form and function of the literature. Instead of squeezing that form and function into already established categories that we have, we just open up and try to understand what the text is doing. We don't need a label. We just need to understand it in its own way. So genre is important. Cultural perspective. Again, they're writing the text from their own culture, and we need to be alert to all of that. We also want to ask about the focus of revelation. Now, by focus of revelation, we're recognizing something important about the way communication takes place. Since it's a high context communication, you need hooks to hang communication on. And those communication hooks are not necessarily going to be the actual thing that the communicator is trying to affirm or teach. But he's got to communicate with something. Okay? Now, this is a tough one to grasp. But for instance, in the ancient world, people didn't have a good grasp of physiology. They believed in the ancient world that basically all the cognitive processes took place down here. Liver, kidneys, heart, intestines, sometimes even stomach. Sometimes I think with my stomach. But at any rate, they believed that all of these things took place down here. They have no idea what the gray stuff up here is. Remember, those of you who know about Egyptian mummification, okay, the stuff down here got taken out carefully, put in canopic jars. This is the person. This is the self. Brain, hook up the nose, pull it out, throw it away. Okay, no use for that. Okay, so their physiology is a little bit goofed up. They just don't have the information. When God communicates to Israel, He does not give them a revised physiology. That's not the revelation. He doesn't say, you know, all those Yahoos around you, or even the Gmails around you, think that they think with their guts, but no, not you. You think with your brains, thus says the Lord. No, that doesn't happen. In fact, God uses, for communication, that ancient physiology. And so God will talk about loving the Lord your God with your heart and soul and mind. You say, mind. Entrails. It's the word for entrails. Okay? Your translators have helped you out. Okay, so God does not change their ideas of physiology. He uses the ideas they have because His focus of revelation is not anatomy and physiology. And so He uses that ancient way of thinking as a communication hook, just to hang the communication on. Because He's not trying to change their physiology. People will figure that stuff out sooner or later. That's not the job of revelation. So when He says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, it doesn't mean anything to say, but wait a minute, don't you really mean my brain? Well, it's talking about the same thing. But the important part is, I don't care what you think with. Honor the Lord with all of your thoughts. That's the revelation, and that's clear enough to us. And it doesn't matter that they have an old way of thinking about physiology. God can get past that. So that's the kind of thing I mean. There are things that are just communication hooks. It's not the focus of the revelation. That's not what God's trying to accomplish. And He's okay with using the world as they understand it for His communication. So let's talk about science in the Bible just a little bit. I'm just going to hit a couple points. Again, I don't present myself as a scientist. I married a scientist. That was my way of kind of getting by all of this. That was my intention all along. No, it wasn't. But anyway, my wife just happens to have scientific training, and she helps me out with some of these things. But there are just a couple major points that I want to make. First of all, not only did God feel free to use, to accommodate, if you will, their own native scientific ways of thinking, we can further say that there is no scientific revelation in the Bible. I can say that with a great deal of confidence. Many of you know I've written Bible background commentaries. That means I've been through every nook and cranny, every corner and every line of Old Testament to try to explain the ancient Near Eastern thinking behind it. There is nothing in the Old Testament that you would say, oh, an ancient Near Eastern person wouldn't have known that little piece of information. God didn't turn around and tell them, oh, really the earth moves around the sun. Or really you live on a sphere. Now some of you have heard before, but wait a minute, the circle of the earth. Isaiah 40:22. Two observations. One, that's not the word for sphere, that's the word for disk. Still circle. Two, everybody in the ancient world believed the world was a disk. No surprises there. There are no science surprises in the Bible. Every bit of thing that touched science, what we call science, was understandable in the ancient context, not only by Israel, but by her neighbors as well. So, God is not doing scientific revelation. Anytime there are details of science We can count on it. This is old world science. And that doesn't mean that God is trying to affirm it. It only means he's using it for communication purposes because he's got important things to say. And it's not that. Secondly, observation of cause and effect does not remove God from the picture. Psalm 139:13, you knit me together in my mother's womb. We read that, we believe that, but it doesn't make us picket the obstetrics and gynecologist's office and telling them to put God back in embryology. Embryology is okay. But wait a second. No, I didn't grow that way. God knit me together in my mother's womb. Now see, our study of embryology only gives us better ideas about how God does what he does. We don't deny what science can learn about that process on the basis of Psalm 139:13. We rather believe that God is working through that process. The scientists cannot detect God's work. We as people of faith believe that it is God's work. But science can still describe it in the ways that they are able to. Why can't we do the same thing with origins? To say whatever science describes and understands and observes, if it's true, that's only telling us how God does what he does. We'll get back to that. So, cause and effect does not remove God from the picture. Furthermore, in the ancient world, they do not have the same array of cause and effect possibilities that we have today. They would have had no such thing as a category of natural cause and effect. When we talk about natural laws, and things are just following natural laws, and that's how cause and effect works, and that helps us understand things. But in the ancient world, they had no such category. The only two sources of cause were God and people. And of course, people had limited cause, but that was all there was. So there's no chance, there's no random, there's no natural. It's God at work. The fact that we have a category of natural cause and effect then does not remove God from that. We can still talk about God as the cause, as ultimate cause, whatever language you want to use, indirect cause, whatever. Okay? Let the philosophers work through that one. But God as a causal factor in things that we might also identify as natural. Again, giving a natural explanation does not remove God from the causal role. So, just a couple observations then about science and the Bible. So, who's science? Or are we going to think in terms of our science and that the Bible somehow affirms or validates our science? Why ours? Well, what about 18th century science? Might have they thought that God would validate theirs? What about 15th century? 12th? How about New Testament era, Greco-Roman science? Oh, what about the 25th century science? Whose science gets validated? Science changes. And we really wouldn't be able to say, well, it should be this one or it should be that one. Why should it be ours? And you know the only right answer to that, it's theirs. It's written against their science. It expresses their science. And we have to understand that that's how that text is working. Reconstructing the physical cosmos from Genesis 1 would be like reconstructing the human anatomy from a Picasso. You can't get there from here. Now it's interesting because, of course, we know who Picasso's model was. There are photographs. We know what she looked like. Even if you compared it to the photograph, you couldn't get there from here. Because Picasso's artistic conventions were not designed to result in a photograph or an understanding of what the person looked like. There were other truths he was trying to capture It's your guess with mine what they are, but whatever. That's how his art was working. There's a story about Picasso, art show, accosted by one of his critics, as he constantly experienced, and the guy was just badgering him. I don't understand. Why don't you just paint things the way they are? The way they really are? Picasso said, I'm not sure I know what you mean. Oh, come on, don't be coy. Just paint them the way they really are. I'm baffled by what you mean. The guy whips out his wallet, holds out a picture of his wife and said, see, that's what she really looks like. And Picasso takes the photo and says, she's kind of small. Kind of flat. And I don't know how she gets along with no legs or arms. Conventions of reality. See, that art critic had accepted certain conventions of reality represented by a photograph of just a person's head. But yet, because he accepted those conventions, that was reality to him. Picasso was painting a different sort of reality. There was just as much reality in his conventions. Reality can be expressed in a variety of conventions. We have no right to impose our conventions on the text just because we're persuaded that that's the more important reality. There's the authority in the text. We have accountability to the reality that it paints and understand its conventions and the reality that it is trying to express, not to impose ours on it. So whose conventions count? If we're talking about authority, theirs do. So my proposed thesis, there are two major points as I talk about what is there about the ancient world that we are totally unaware of, oblivious, that make a difference in reading Genesis 1. I'm going to have two things that I'm going to talk about. Number one is what I call a functional ontology. Don't worry, I'll explain it. That might be high context, sorry. Okay, but I'll explain it. And secondly is the idea of the cosmic temple. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and unpack these and talk about each one of them. Okay? But again, the whole idea here is these are things that I have found in the biblical text and in the ancient world that are totally foreign to us. So, day one. Why didn't God just call the light, light? What's up? You know, this is actually where I started, where I had my aha moment. I was in class, teaching about Genesis 1, middle of a lecture, and came to verse 5 in day 1 and asked that very same question to my class. I had never asked it quite that way before. We had always talked about the text and what it was doing. But there it is. God called the light day. What's up with that? If it's light, call it light. If you call it day, it's not really light, is it? It's rather, whatever day is a period of light. That's the connection. And that works. God called the period of light day, and the period of darkness he called night. That makes sense. Okay? Well, back up a verse. God separated between the light and the darkness. Now, we know here we're not talking physics. Okay? Darkness is the absence of light. You can't separate light and darkness. They're not together, and that doesn't work at all. But let's stick with what we learned in verse 5. So God separated the period of light from the period of darkness, and the period of light he called day, and the period of darkness he called night. Now we can see it, distinguishing periods, alternating periods of light and darkness, day and night. Okay, cool. So in verse 5, it's a period of light and a period of darkness. In verse 4, it's a period of light and a period of darkness. In verse 3, stick with me, God said, let there be we're stuck with it. Period of light. So, of course, we know that in verse 2 there was darkness. God said, let there be a period of light. And God distinguished between periods of light and periods of darkness. In the period of light, he named day. Period of darkness, he named night. And so there's evening and there was morning, day one. So on day one, God created the basis for time, alternating day and night. God created day and night on day one as a period of light and a period of darkness. There is nothing material going on here. We might kind of be able to think of light in material terms. Particle, wave. I don't know about you, but I have trouble imagining all of that. I know the physicists are right. I trust them. But, we still have trouble thinking of light as something material. Walk through a sunbeam and bonk. Sorry. I'll walk around that. No! We have trouble with that. But certainly, if we're reading the text as an Israelite read the text, they are not thinking that there's something material there. To them, light is as immaterial as darkness is. And this is a period of light and a period of darkness. This is nothing material going on here. Time. Time is a function. For them, it's not Einstein type of thinking about time, of course. They're not thinking physics there either. What do they mean by time? Alternating periods of light and darkness. Day and night. That's time. This is his first step then in bringing order to the cosmos, an important function that he establishes. Now, that leads us to start asking questions about this verb, God created. What are we dealing with here? After all, if time is a function, then what do we mean that God created? And the time is one of the results of that. So we have to do a little bit of study on the verb create as it is used in Hebrew. Here's some of the results of the study that I offer. It's in Lost World. It's in other things that I've done. Okay, there are about 50 occurrences. God is a subject, so it's a divine activity. But what's most important is look at the direct objects. After all, we find out what kind of activity a verb represents by looking at the direct objects. What happens? What's the result of creating? Okay, so we look at it and wow, look at these things. We're dealing with a whole list of direct objects that are not material in nature. Well, what in the world would it mean for God to create something like Jerusalem? Okay, God create the nations. God create purity. Create in me a pure heart, O God. We're not talking about a heart transplant here. Remember what heart is in that ancient context. We're not talking about a brain transplant either. What is it to create a pure heart? Now we can get a little glimpse of this because even in English we have a variety of ways that we use the verb create. After all, we can create a masterpiece. We can create a committee. We can create a curriculum. We can create havoc. There's all kinds of things that we could talk about creating that really is not a material process. Remember, here we're interested in understanding what Hebrew terminology means. Once after I gave a lecture like this, a lady came up, she was very irate, she was very upset with me, she didn't like what I was saying, she didn't like my theories at all, and she said, "Why can't you just read the text? Why can't you read the word for what it is? It says create." And I mean, it must have been the spirit. I graciously did not open my Hebrews text and say, "You start." Okay, but see, that's the issue. We are looking at Hebrew words that have meaning to a Hebrew audience. And we have to learn what that is. And when we find that create can be used in all of these kinds of contexts where nothing material is going on, we have to start asking the question, what do they understand by this word create? Now, part of that we can discern by what's the starting point and what's the ending point. Okay, in the biblical text, first of all, I would propose to you, and I'm not going to argue this, I'm not going to try to demonstrate this point. It's not one that I hold myself. I mean, I do hold it myself, but I didn't make it up. Lots of Old Testament people believe this. That verse 1 is not a separate act. It's rather a literary introduction. So verse 1 is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the cosmos. So let me tell you how he did it. And then it's the 7 days that he tells you how he did it. And then the result is at the end of those 7 days, so God completed the heavens and the earth that he had made. Okay? So that's the way that he proceeds. I need to keep moving with my time here, don't I? Okay, so we start then in verse 2, where things are formless and void. Notice it doesn't start with no material. The sea is there, the deep. Okay? It's already there. And so if the starting point is not without material, then we think that maybe he's not trying to tell you how all material came into being. Rather, the starting point is no functions. It's not working. It's not ordered. No roles have been established. And so it's lacking matter. I mean, it's not lacking matter, it's lacking order. Darkness and sea are elements of disorder, sometimes called chaos in the ancient world. Tohu, the words here, tohu vavohu, formless and void, means lacking worth or purpose, a place where nothing is done. We have an Egyptian parallel. They talk about the non-existent, and it's things like the desert and the cosmic oceans. To them are non-existent. So here, both in Hebrew Bible and the rest of the ancient text, we're getting the idea that existence is not defined by material shape, structure. That's not how they define existence. If non-existent can be something that we would call material, then existence is not defined by the material. Here we're talking about ontology. What does it mean to exist? Something exists by virtue of what? For us, it exists by virtue of having a material structure. We can perceive it with our senses. And so we say it exists. I can see it. I can touch it. It exists. Our ontology is material. But that's not the only way ontology can be. But see, we would never even think that there could be another option. We are so persuaded of our own ontology that we don't even think of another possibility. But in the ancient world, I propose, their ontology was functional. That means something existed when it was given a function and a role in an ordered structure. Okay? So, the line between existence and non-existence is a functional line, not a material line. That is their functional ontology, and that's how they thought in the ancient world. And we can see evidence of this in the Bible as well. Functions in creation. We already talked about day 1, time. Day 2, weather. God puts the weather systems as the ancients understood it. Waters above, waters below. That's how the weather works. Separated by an air pocket and a solid membrane. That's how weather works. And remember, the science part is just hooks. Just like the heart. It's just hooks to hang things on. We don't have to go find the waters above or the waters below the way they thought about them, just like we don't have to figure out how our blood pumps carry out cognitive exercises. Okay? We don't have to do that. We accept that that's the hooks to hang things on. God is not revealing science. His point here is that God set up the function of weather. Okay? Now, some people think the word used for the expanse, the firmament, rakia in Hebrew, some people think it's the solid thing that holds back the waters. It might be, in which case it's material, but it's not something that we think is material. We don't think there's anything solid up there. NASA rockets, boink, we don't think that, okay? If it's the air pocket, which I've been recently more inclined to think, okay, that's not material. They're not thinking of hydrogen molecules and nitrogen molecules and all of that. It's their world, and it's an air pocket. It's nothing. So, again, day 1 had nothing material. Day 2 has nothing material, at least nothing that both they and we thought of as material. Day 3, he says, let the dry land emerge. It doesn't say he made the dry land. It says, let plants sprout forth. It doesn't say he made the plants. Functions. He's showing food here. You've got water sources, you've got dirt, and you've got the idea that something grows. Drop seed. Same thing grew. Drop seed. Whoa! Happened again. We've lost the wonder of it. But this is the whole process. Amazing. And that's why we have food. In days 1, 2, and 3, God created time, weather, and food. Now, I'll tell you that that is meaningful to any culture, any time, any place. And it's what we talk about at the bus stop in the supermarket. Time, weather, and food. Somehow quarks haven't slipped into the conversation yet. So God set up this functional world, the functional world we all know. He's the one that made it work. They're not interested in the manufacture of material. It's just not on their radar. They don't care. Just like when you open your computer, you're interested in your operating system and your apps and the speed of this ROM and RAM, right? And you never once have asked a question about the soldering on your motherboard. You don't care. It's not an issue for you. You care about the functions of that computer. And so in the ancient world, they cared about the functions in their world because it's a world that's run by God or gods, and who's in charge is what's important. It's a business, it's a kingdom, it's not a machine. And the material parts were of no concern to them. Look at Genesis 8:22. After the flood, God restores all of this. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, that's food. Cold, heat, summer, winter, that's weather. Day and night, that's time. Reestablishing the functions of creation. So our functional ontology, in ancient functional ontology, existence is defined by having a function. Genesis 1 then provides an account of functional origins, not an account of material origins. It's their world, it's their text. Genesis 1 is about God bringing order, that is functionality, out of disorder, that is non-functionality. It's therefore fruitless to ask what things God created on a given day, what he made, what he manufactured, because the text is not concerned about the existence of matter or foundational history. Whatever matter existed or exists, God made it. But we're not asking about all the things God did. We're asking, what is this account about? Because it's their text, not ours. Dilbert, every project you worked on this year got canceled after reorganization. Functional negation. You did nothing. It's as if you didn't exist. Functional ontology. Right? You didn't exist because you didn't do anything. Well, that's not entirely true. I occupied space. Oh, material ontology comes in strong. I'd like to see someone who doesn't exist do that. Well, a dead person can occupy space. Uh-oh. But a dead person exists. Really? Material, not functional, even in Dilbert. The logical superiority of a functional ontology over a material one. Consider nearly all of the modern controversies concern what the biblical view is of the span of time over which things, material objects, were created. Old earth, young earth, that's material questions. If the text primarily addresses functions, not material, what's the implications for the controversies? Poof. Cosmos' temple. Boy, I've got to move fast. Sorry. We doing all right? Okay. Cosmos' temple. Okay? When we read Genesis One, we get to day 7 and we think that, oh, okay, we reached the end. This is the end music, as my father used to call it in the movies. You know, it's just kind of tying things up here, a little theological footnote, and we're all taken care of here. The real creation takes place in days 1 through 6. Day 7, okay, God rested, whatever in the world that means, okay? Well, no, not okay. An ancient reading the text has a totally different response. An ancient reading of the text says, oh, this is a temple text. And you say what? Where'd you get that? I don't see the word temple anywhere in sight. He said, it's easy. God rested. Okay, I'm not with you. God's rest in temples. That's the only place God's rest, in temples. In fact, that's what temples are built for God's to rest in. If God's resting, this is a temple text. We'd never see that. High context. We're not in that circle of communication. We've got some catching up to do. Okay, that's an ancient temple text there. Rest is the main goal of creation. People may be the climax of the 6 days, but rest is the climax of the creation account. This is a temple text. God, I'm proposing, is setting up the cosmos as sacred space, which is marked by His presence. That's what we call a temple. God is setting up sacred space for His occupation. If God's not there, it's not sacred space. And all of the passage is meaningless. He sets it up to work for people. He doesn't need it. But He sets it up as sacred space. That means He's in it. And if you miss that, you miss what Genesis 1 is all about. Because this is not just about a cosmos full of material stuff. It's about a cosmos that is sacred space, working for people with God in it to relate to these people that He has created. The temple is constructed as a microcosmos. I can't go into the details. Look at Psalm 132. Let us go to His dwelling place, temple. Let us worship at His footstool, the ark. Arise, O Lord, come to your resting place. That's what the temple is. For you in the ark of your might. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for His dwelling. Okay, temple. This is my resting place. Okay, now we get the clincher. Forever and ever, here I will sit enthroned. We think of God resting as kind of kicking back. Okay, had a hard week, creating things. Well, I'm just going to take a breather here. We know that's not true, but we don't know what else to say. This tells us what to say. When God rests, it means He has taken up His place there, His throne. His rest is His rule. Rest means everything has been brought under His control so that now what becomes normal can proceed. God is ruling in His place. When God says He's going to bring rest to Israel from her enemies all around, He's not saying so you can watch Sunday afternoon football or so you can kind of sit back and have a cool drink. He gives them rest, which means He brings them stability, equilibrium, so that they can live their lives. That's what rest is. And Hebrews tells us we haven't quite gotten there yet. There's more rest coming in God's presence, in new creation. When God rests, it means He has created stability in this cosmos that is now operating for people as sacred space, Him in it, relating to His creation. It's His temple. This cosmos is sacred space. And that's what it has to tell you. It is functional, sacred space. The 7 days then, we find out that temple inaugurations take place often enough in 7-day periods. If we ask, why is this happening in 7 days? It's because it's the inauguration of sacred space. When they built Solomon's temple, they had years and years and years of material preparation. And even when all that preparation was done, there it stands. You could look at it, you could touch it. Is it a temple? No! It's ready to be a temple. Only when God comes into it in a 7-day inauguration process does it become the sacred space it was built to be in a long material process. So, the word day suggested should be a 24-hour period. Fine. but it's not a day for material things happening. So that 7 days has nothing to do with the age of the earth. Age of the earth is a material question. Okay, so this is not about the age of the earth. This is functions, not material. 7 days is a temporal integration. The objects are not necessarily being made in those 7 days. The days are concerned with bringing order, not making things, and therefore the 7 days would have nothing to do with the age of the earth. We've really got to move here. So the text asserts that in the 7-day initial period, God brought the cosmos into operation by assigning roles and functions. That's what I propose Genesis 1 is. I'd better stop there. Thank you very much.